Welcome back to the Long Horizon Show as we continue our conversation with Mr. Clifton Taulbert. I'm your host, Luke Fears. If you're just finding us, make sure you check us out on YouTube or follow us on your favorite social media or podcast platform. We hope you enjoyed this episode of our 4-part series with Mr. Clifton Taulbert.
All right, we're back.
Did you have a good lunch?
It was a great lunch. Yes. How about you?
It was pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was good. Healthy.
Good.
So healthy is a small G good.
Yes. Good. Well, we can get into health talks later because that's part of getting old, right? Managing that.
Managing your life.
Exactly.
I love 42 much better.
But still, at 80, you seem to have energy and you're a go-getter. You're not putting your feet up.
No. I want to walk out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hey, one of the things you're still doing is this Roots Coffee. CEO of the Roots Java Coffee Company. Tell us a little bit about Roots.
Well, it's one of those opportunities that I had. And some days I don't call it an opportunity. Some day I call it work. But basically, it was an opportunity to work with a friend who had started the company. And because of his work, he was not able to put the time in it that he wanted to.
Yeah. And
my company had been very much involved in introducing Stairmaster to the world.
Wow.
And is my friend with Roots Java Coffee said that if you can sell Stairmaster, surely you can sell coffee.
Yeah, right. Roots Java is in all Quick Trips around. And for anybody with a Quick Trip in your area, you know how good of a convenience store that is. And what a great partner. And you can also buy it online.
Yeah, it's right online as well, rootsjava.com.
Rootsjava.com. The beans come from
Rwanda.
Okay. Cool. Well, go check that out and go get some Roots coffee. And also tell me a little bit about your shirt that you have. What's Danzy?
Well, that's another thing. That's my son's company.
Okay.
Danzy Design Studio. And this year was a good year for him, and last year was even better. Abercrombie Fitch, each year they chooses a up-and-coming design company to partner and collaborate with them.
Wow.
And they had 100 to choose from what I understand, and they chose my son's company.
Wow.
And he knocked it out of the ball.
Yeah, way to go, Marshall. That's awesome.
Yeah,
cool.
He's doing that, and he does now things for Pilates companies.
Okay.
He designed all of the goods that they sell within those spaces.
Okay.
You know, hoodies and t-shirts and tote bags and all that stuff like that. He designed those for the companies as well. And right now he's on something entirely different because his background is in television production and all that. So he's on the production team for The Bachelor.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So he called me every night to tell me what he's doing. And I said, are they free? He's, oh yeah. They asked me, are they paying me?
Yeah.
They're definitely free.
Yeah, right. Oh, that's awesome. Well, good for Marshall. That's really good to hear an update. How old is he now?
Marshall is 42, I believe.
Okay.
I try not to know his dates.
Yeah, right.
Much as I up his dates, mine as well. You know, I love him when he's 38.
That's
now stay there. Don't leave.
Yeah, that's great.
We can use that number.
Well, yeah, let's pick back up where we were. You were telling us about a connection with, I think, Mr. Hilton.
Conrad Hilton's son.
Okay.
Yeah. No, he's just, but he was related to the book, Once Upon a Time When We Were Colored.
Okay.
And that's why I thought about it, because he probably knew more about his financing and dates and stuff than I did, because of the guy who's one of the main financiers with Once Upon a Time We Were Colored. He served on a board with Eric Hilton.
Okay.
And Eric and I became friends in a very unusual way. He's like my age, he's an older guy. And he was on getting on the plane in Houston. He was so loaded with stuff. I mean, he couldn't hardly walk. There was so many boxes. And he was kind of disheveled and nobody helped him. So I got up, I said, let me help you get some of this stuff in the plane so we can leave. And got us stuck there. Then we ended up sitting by each other. And we were talking, just had a great conversation. Finally, he said, let me give you my card. And that's when he gave me a card. And he said, yeah, I'm Conrad Hilton's son.
Wow.
And so that's where the friendship started.
Okay.
And but he was always concerned about when the movie was going to be made and stuff like that, keeping track of all of that.
So it's 30 years.
Yeah, that's what you reminded me.
30 years.
It was a long time ago.
30 years since the movie was put out there. If you guys haven't seen it, go check it out. It's got lots of actors and actresses that you'd recognize. You know, it shares the story of little Cliff. I was trying to think. An actor that was in like Cool Runnings played your
Was it Mel?
cousin
Oh,
that was in Detroit.
Detroit.
Yeah.
What is his real name is Melvin. That was
Okay. Yeah. He seemed like a stud, you know, your cousin. I think was he the one that became a doctor?
No, it was his brother.
Okay.
His older brother.
Okay. But then was Crosby's wife who, Crosby show? The lady that played.
Yeah, she played. Felicia Rashad played my great aunt that raised
his great aunt. Yeah. Yeah.
And Polly Bergen played Mrs. What is her name?
Yeah,
But I can't.
I put you on the spot to remember names, but yeah, I mean, it is a really
nice. The lady that I had dinner at the books and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Polly Bergen played. I really enjoyed meeting Polly Bergen and giving her the backstory on Mrs. Knight, and she was so delightful to know that she could play a lady that had been that gracious.
Yeah. Oh, cool. I'm thinking there's another movie in one of these books as well. We'll see, but 30 years that made, like you said about the story about Greenville and the opening night. It had a big impact. That movie was, well known.
No, it did. The book itself, when they published the first printing, I think it was 3,000 copies. They said that would last me for about 5 years. So they were happy to get their money back in about 5 years. The publisher, Small Kid Press. But anyway, long story short, before the year was up, they had already reprinted it 3 times. And I was on the Phil Donahue show.
Okay.
And that is a memorable experience. I would never, ever forget that. This limousine, which is probably as long as Sepulpa, picked me up. It was so long to take me to the Algonquin Hotel where all the guests stayed for the Phil Donahue show.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to this place, the theater where everything was taking place. And there were 4 of the writers on program that day, myself and 3 others. There was 4 of us. But all of the others had come from major publishing houses. So they had like an assistant with them per person. So if the person sweated, someone was right there to go. And I was sitting in the corner by myself. I had nobody with me. And I was sitting by the locomotive dip. And it had been sitting there so long, it had turned brown. So I just sat there, and Phil Donahue came in, shook all the hands. It was just a gracious meeting him. And he didn't know me from anybody, me or the other guy, so they didn't have any favorites in the group. Yeah. But they had stacked all the books on the table. And he just began fingering through the books and stuff like that. And then Once Upon a Time We Were Colored, there's a chapter called Luggage, Legs, and Gorgeous Colored Women. Mm-hmm. And he had started reading that when the guy said, 3, 2, 1. And all of a sudden, he was on the world stage reading from my book and kept doing it.
Oh, wow.
So I got, Tulsa phone system went crazy. For about almost maybe a couple of hours. Wow. With calls were coming in from all over the world to get a copy of the book.
Wow. Phil Donahue. So that was like maybe in the early 6 months or so after you published it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. And then it becomes, national bestseller?
Yeah, it became a national bestseller. It had a life of its own. I was just thankful that I was attached to it. Because
1989.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I had carried it around as a manuscript for 24 years, trying to get it published, but didn't make any headway with anyone. Wow. But once they gave it life, it made an incredible life for people.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, your life changed. What are you doing for work, or were you in a day job before that, or in the midst of that?
I was writing, doing a lot of consulting work. I work with educators. I taught at Harvard as a lecturer for 5 years, 5 summers.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And taught at the Air Force Academy as well. And I did some work for St. Charles Stewart University in Australia, Sydney, Australia.
Oh, you're in Sydney.
Yeah, and I worked for the Department of Defense. So all of the American schools
Wow.
that was run by the Department of Defense throughout Europe and Central America and Southeast Asia. I did a lot of their leadership development and training.
So this was before the book is published.
No, the book is out.
Okay, but at this time
it just kind of those things were going along simultaneously.
Okay. All right, let's back up. All right, we were in. I think the last time we were talking, it was about your time in Air Force. If we're going to go chronological, you're doing at the end of Air Force. You got a decision to make.
Right.
Well, what's going on? Catch us up there.
Well, basically, most of my friends outside of the military were friends in Washington, and all of your friends back home. But the people that I saw on a regular basis would have been the friends I made while stationed at Andrews Air Force Base, and all of them had plans for me, which is interesting. They just assumed that I was going to go to school in D.C., either Georgetown or George Washington University, because I don't know if you're pretty young. You may not remember Look magazine.
Look magazine, yeah.
It was one of the major publications.
Uh-huh.
And the editors for that magazine were good friends. They had a son about my age, and they invited, but always, not every weekend, but nearly every weekend, they would invite me out to their home for dinner, because I was a soldier, and soldiers had to be invited out. So they'd invite me out to their home for dinner. But they did a good story on General Bradley, who's a 5-star general, and they included some things about me in the military in that particular story. And so, with that being said, they had pretty well decided for me where I was going to go to college and finish, transfer from the University of Maryland to one of the George Washington or Georgetown. And I remember the Sunday afternoon I was in having dinner in Washington, D.C., in Georgetown. And one of the hosts that invited me, she said, "Well, Clifton, which college are you going to? Just tell us." I said, "I'm going to a small college in Oklahoma, Oral Roberts University." And she had a pitcher of milk in her hand, and it dropped on the floor. And she said, "Tell me again, where are you going?" And I said, "Oral Roberts University." And she said, "Oh, I wouldn't have thought that."
You poor thing, waste all your talent to come out to Tulsa or something like that.
No, they were very absolutely sure that I was going to go to school in D.C.
Sure, yeah. And I'm sure, again, like your community from Glen Allan, that was a community for you saying, "Hey, here's where you ought to go." And why did you choose the left turn?
I don't know. I mean, there are a myriad of reasons why. I didn't know Oral Roberts very well. I never met him before, anything like that, so I had no knowledge there. And I don't recall having met anyone from the college. But from a perspective of my personal faith, there were some of the things that they were doing there that I believed in, and that sort of that helped me to make my decision where I would spend the last of my 4 years.
Okay, so you come to Tulsa, you finish up your degree, or were you still doing banking, or would you graduate with there?
No, I didn't do banking. I did banking after I graduated from ORU.
Okay.
Because I got hired at OAB, Oklahoma National Bank.
Okay, you're at Oklahoma National.
Well, Bank of Oklahoma.
Bank of Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, Bank of Oklahoma. So you're working for Bank of Oklahoma out of college.
Yeah.
And then you go back to school.
Go back to school to SMU.
Okay.
To Southwest Graduate School of Banking.
Okay.
For 3 years.
Okay. Um, all right. So after ORU, do you meet Barbara around this time?
Now, after ORU, I started working at the University Village Retirement Center. I worked there for 5 years, and I met Barbara in that 5th year.
Oh, okay.
That Barbara and I met.
Okay. So you're probably late 20s.
I was 27.
Okay. 27, you meet Barbara. How'd you guys meet?
I knew you were going to get around to that. I should ask the audience, is it his business for me to tell?
Hey, we don't have to say it. We don't have to say it, but
no, it was the closest thing to a Chinese arranged get together that you could possibly imagine. In fact, my son has grown up most of his life saying, "It ain't gonna happen to me that way. I promise you that." And so, but no, my mother knew Barbara's family.
Okay.
And she fell in love with Barbara. And so she thought that what can I do to keep Barbara in the family?
Yeah.
And so she just put on a thinking hat. And she thought, oh, there's Clifton. Ah, I got it. And so I had to come home unfortunately, for a funeral. And that afternoon, we drove over to Arkansas where Barbara lived.
Okay.
And I had a chance to meet her there.
Wow. Okay. That's fun. Mom introduced you on a blind date.
Yeah. Yep.
So you guys get married and go to Dallas for graduate school?
No. I stayed here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we went back and forth.
Back and forth. Okay.
Yeah. So
you're working for BOK, you're getting your banking degree, you're newly married. What's the next, did you guys wait to have kids, or is that when you had Marshall? Or
no, Marshall was born in 1981.
Okay.
And
so we're in the 70s.
Yeah, the 70s.
And what's going on culturally at that time in America?
You know, culturally speaking, I would have to ask you, what do you think was going on at that time? Because the 70s was kind of a slowdown of the 60s. But the 60s were pretty much totally involved for the most part. Culturally, who is our country? What can our country become? And what can we do to help it to become that? The 70s was kind of some of the same things, but not as much of the involvement that had been in the 60s. So you were kind of continuing the 60s more through application.
Yeah.
Of application. The 60s were, I say, the decade of conversation.
Yeah.
And the 70s would have been the decade of application.
Okay.
That's how I would.
That's because you had Vietnam, and then you had civil rights movement in the 60s.
Yeah, right? In the 60s. And it well into the 70s, but it did not have the same degree of energy that was in the 60s.
Okay. And Carter's in the White House, I think, in the 70s, maybe. The economy in Tulsa's doing well compared to the 80s, perhaps.
The 80s was a downturn in the oil industry.
Yeah. So banking, you're doing good. How long do you work for BOK?
5 years.
5 years during that season. And then do you go from there to the Stairmaster?
No, I was doing the Stairmaster all along.
Oh, okay. You had a side hustle.
Yeah, it was a side hustle.
Okay, cool. And it was like early startup stage?
Very early.
Okay.
Like, may not make it stage.
Yeah, okay.
But I thought you could,
And it did.
And it did.
Yeah.
Yeah, Marshall still remembers me taking him out there to the plant where they were making them.
Okay.
And he said, Dad, I used to try to make the stairs move, but they wouldn't move. I said, Marshall, you have to plug it in, son.
Now there's one in every gym across America. There's some.
No, our company, Freemount, which you're aware of, the diversified marketing company, we sold the first Stairmaster to the military.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The first one. The guy believed in me. He didn't believe in Stairmaster. Totally believed in me. He said, anybody that would travel from Tulsa to Dallas for 3 or 4 years to get a contract with the federal government, you deserve all the relief you can get.
Okay.
And that's what I did.
So you're showing some sales strength there, but in banking, were you doing sales or?
No. In banking, it was more of it's more marketing.
Yeah.
But not from a sales perspective, but working with the different entities within the bank. I was assigned to the trust division primarily, is where I worked with the trust offices in programs and products that they were bringing to their clients.
Okay. I always like to mention the Bank of Oklahoma owns Bank of Texas and Bank of Arizona and all these others. I lived in Texas for a little bit, and so it was the Oklahoma-Texas rivalry. But yeah, BOK is a great company and has grown. Was probably wasn't as big as it is now back then.
No, it's huge now. I think after the philanthropist,
Mr. Kaiser.
Kaiser became and bought the controlling shares of BOK.
Yeah. He's done an excellent job and been a great ambassador to Tulsa.
Yeah, he and his sister. I think it may have just been the two of them, if I'm not mistaken.
Ruth.
Yeah, Ruth guy.
She's so generous. Yeah. All right. So we're BOK, Stairmaster. How did you launch, or what are your decisions career-wise in this stage when you moved from BOK?
Well, I didn't have any plans specifically, and but it caused me to really look at what I enjoy doing, and that was at that juncture that I decided to create Freemount.
Okay.
To take it further than it done with Stairmaster. Stairmaster operate under that as well. But I realized that I had a conversation for academic institutions and for corporations. And so I began to pursue that. And it was, not like going in the dark, but it wasn't a lot of light.
Sure.
But it's something that I wanted to do, and I had the opportunity to do it. And it was left up to me. If I did a good job, it could work out really well. And I think I did a fairly decent job.
Yeah. You're 27, 29 by the time you're starting your first company?
No, I'm probably 29, maybe 30. I'm trying to think, because I started the company before I left it. I didn't leave another company. Then you pick up here. Yeah. It was a culminating.
Yeah.
So I've actually, once Fremont was established, it went with me wherever I went.
Yeah. And so honestly, I was just hearing another podcast from an older man, and he described what you're talking about. He's like, hey, don't quit your day job. They're paying you. Do a side hustle, and grow it to where you're ready to launch comfortably, and you're not taking such a crazy risk, stressing you out too much.
Now, it took me a while to get the contract for Stairmaster.
Okay.
It took a long time.
Yeah.
And you could have easily given up.
Yeah.
But I'm not one to really give up.
You're working deals.
Yeah. I think I like side hustle. That's nice.
Yeah. Well, and it turned into...
I'm not an athlete, but that's a name I could choose. Side
hustle, yeah. But now then it turned into your entrepreneurial career.
Right.
And you start running the Freemount Corp. Is it fair to say like strategic consulting services?
Yeah. For educators, I worked a lot with leadership.
Yeah.
How to accomplish what you set out to accomplish. What are the things you have to look at? And my thought has always been, in K-12 education, you're there for one purpose only. Give the student the wings to fly.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's pretty broad statement, but I wanted the educators to clearly understand that it's being there is to get the child in a position of being able to understand how important they are to their generation and the next. Mm-hmm. It's not just the program that you teach, but it is the life that you wrap that program in that helps to make a difference.
Sure.
And so, again, thinking about the people back home, because I don't know the date of it, 8 Habits of the Heart, but it became a national bestseller as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it was literally about the unselfishness of a group of people that I had defined in my life and the consistency of unselfishness. Because we hear the word selfish or unselfish all the time, but we don't stop to think in terms of that's a gift we can bring into the life of someone else. Our unselfish attitude can be a great gift to someone else because that will dictate how we work with them. How do we persevere when things are not well? How do we rejoice when things go better than we thought? So an unselfish commitment to life. And the 8 Habits of the Heart just becomes 8 frameworks to fill in, where people ask themselves the question, how can I become nurturing attitude? That's the first habit of the heart. And that has to do with the unselfish use of time. Because people are, I would do this, but I don't have enough time. But the bad news is we're never going to have 2810. We got 24/7. That's it. And can we accomplish what we need to accomplish within the time frame that has been set aside? I think perhaps we can.
Yeah, and teachers. So you spent your 30s then serving education
and 8 Habits of the Heart. You know the name John Wooden?
Yes, John Wooden. Yeah, the legendary coach from UCLA.
Yeah, he read 8 Habits of the Heart. I didn't know this.
Okay.
But one of his former students and basketball players was the president of the Williams companies here in Tulsa.
Oh, wow.
Keith Bailey.
Okay.
And he sent Keith Bailey a copy of the book and a handwritten letter, which ended with these words, I couldn't put it down until I finished the last page.
Yeah.
That's the impact that book has had on people around. And I keep Coach Wooden's letter. Because Keith Bailey called me, come up to his office one day, and that's what he was telling me how he had gotten it. And he said, I really think I should give this letter to you.
Yeah.
And he gave me the handwritten letter from John Wooden.
That's very cool.
That I made 10,299 copies. Not really. But I handled it very carefully. I didn't want anything to happen to it.
That's awesome. It's funny you say that. My dad has a magazine that it's his face and he signed it. Coach Wooden signed it to me and my brothers, and it's up in a frame and whatnot. So yeah,
Does he actually frame the letter?
I think you should. Yeah. John Wooden. He's a stud.
But he also lectured at the United States Air Force Academy.
Yeah, and every time
I first met him.
Your message and his message, because I've heard other stories of his players talking about what they were telling him. Like you guys have a very similar message to share about community and taking ownership and no excuses and being more unselfish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, it was a connection there. Not athletic, but it was at another level.
Now, is it true you met Michael Jordan as well?
Yes, but I didn't know who he was. We talked for a long time.
You talked to this guy for a long time.
Well, he never said I'm Michael.
I know, but you didn't recognize him, which is crazy.
Every picture I see of Michael Jordan, he was very dark and had very bald head.
Yeah.
And his face was, the cover of a Slick magazine was shiny black, is what I call it. He was shining guy. Yeah. The guy that stood beside me that I had to look up to, he had ashy face. Don't shine. I said, I don't know who this guy is. But what happened, my son was with me. I'd gone to take he and several of his friends to the Final Four in San Antonio, wherever it was, San Antonio. And when Marshall came around the corner, he literally fell on the floor. He said, Mr. Jordan, I am so glad to meet you. Then I said to myself, oh my God, I was standing here this long talking to Michael Jordan.
And he loved it probably too. This is after the movie was released.
Yeah.
And so he probably saw the movie, was interested, and
I don't know. I mean, because we never talked about anything like that at all.
Oh, okay. You guys just had a regular
conversation.
Small talk. That's awesome.
Small talk.
That's funny.
Real small.
That's good. Okay, let's go back. All right, catch me up. You're Fremount Corp. You're done with BOK. You're starting this firm, and you're trying to get this book published at this time.
Yeah. This book comes out in '89.
In '89, okay, and this is kind of '70s era. Marshall was born in '81.
'81.
Okay, and so by the time Marshall's born and Annie's born, it's you're full on in the Fremont Corp.
Yeah.
And so entrepreneur, raising kids. Tell me about that season of life.
Probably the best season of my life. Yeah. Establishing a foundation of value. I remember doing work at a university in Baltimore. And they had bused in about 120 kids from inner city Baltimore. And we were talking. One of the young men asked me, he said, if you could live your life over again, Mr. Taulbert, what would you do? I said, I would spend more time with my son. Yeah. I said, that's one thing I've learned. You can't go back and do it.
Yeah.
You do it while it is to be done.
Yeah.
And, I mean, we spent time, but not as much as I should have.
Because you're trying to provide and protect your family and be out there and doing the hero career thing, in your 30s, developing your identity and brand. Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say.
Okay. So, but your one kind of letter to yourself at that time would be chill out on that and focus on on your kids.
Well, when Marshall went to college, I had to cash in stock to pay for it. And he said, well, that's your problem, Dad, because you didn't have to be this way. I was an athlete, and you didn't encourage me. I said, Marshall, he played for Jinx, son. I said, me, Mom, and Annie, we never missed a game. You would get halfway the court, and rather than play with the ball and get it in the goal, in the hoops there, you stopped and looked up in the audience. Hey, Mommy! I said, Marshall, basketball people that are chosen to play on the team, they don't do that.
Yeah.
I knew you weren't going to be no athletic star. So I'm like, hey, Mommy.
Yeah. I'm coaching my kids in their sports right now, and you definitely get the kids that are chasing butterflies, and then the kids that are like focused all on the ball.
All of his friends were focused.
Yeah.
His friends were. I mean, I don't think Marshall was even sweaty.
That's oh, that's good. So you have Marshall, mid-'80s. You also have a daughter named Annie.
Yeah.
In 1988, she was born, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then the book gets published in 1989.
Mm-hmm.
And life changes, probably got real busy real fast.
Yeah.
Tell me about that season of life with book getting published and having two kids.
Yeah. It was better than I could have dreamed. And I loved my family, and I loved my family. And Marshall was the light of my life. And Annie was just the gift that God said, I'm just going to make you guys happy. When Dad comes Annie. And Annie was smart. She was so smart and so pretty. When I come home, there's a store that women use to buy stuff from called Taulbert's.
Yes.
And they would deliver stuff to your house. So when I'd come home from a travel or whatever, Annie would go, Daddy, the Taulbert man was here every day with a box.
Telling on her mom. Oh, that's good.
But that was great joy, but it didn't last long. Annie was 7, had a birthday party. All of her friends came. And within a year of that 7th birthday, Aunt Catherine died. And Barbara and I lived a death-like life for about 10 years.
She was 7. She died. How did she die?
Sickle cell anemia.
Sickle cell anemia.
She had several strokes and never recovered.
Oh my gosh.
And so for 10 years, Barbara and I don't think we intentionally invited any of our nieces and nephews that were around Annie's age to our house. It was like the house had changed. And there was no little girl upstairs saying, "Daddy, come here." That was gone. And and 10 years passed. Marshall is out of college and living in LA. And we went to LA to visit him, and we were at a store. And so Marshall saw something, said, "Dad, would you buy this for me?" I said, "No." I said, I went, no, but you don't need that. He said, "I bet if Aunt Catherine asked you to buy it." I said, "Of course I would if that was Annie, but you're not Annie." And but when we got back up there the first time, we all laughed, mentioning Annie's name.
10 years.
And Barbara and I decided, what can we do to help others? And in Oklahoma, Barbara and I established a fund called the Aunt Catherine Fund. And my friends and family support it. And we send kids in Oklahoma to camp up until COVID stopped us for a few years. But we raised money all over the country, sent Oklahoma kids who met the criteria to camp for a while, for I think it was like a week, a couple of weeks, or whatever it was. We sent, and it's called the Aunt Catherine Camp.
Wow.
Because these are things that she didn't live long enough to do.
Yeah.
And when it's just me and Barbara, we can sit there and talk about it and cry. And Marshall is always thoughtful of his sister.
Yeah.
When he was co-designed with Abercrombie, he had done several things for ladies that he had not done before. And he was crying. I said, what's what? He said, "If my sister was here, I would have to be calling someone else to do this. Annie would do it for me." And he loved his sister. And so he was asked to design the inside of a Pilates, I know I'm pronouncing it correctly, Pilates shop with the exercise deal. And he named it 8188 Studio in memory of he and Annie, together. But that's something you never get over. You never get over it.
I can't imagine.
No matter what you do, it does not wipe that away. It's right there with you. And other than the sickness, Annie had no problems. She had a great life.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thankful that we were able to give her a great life. But there's part of my life that always keep me remembered that I'm part of a disappearing act. Mm-hmm. Humans disappear at some point.
Yeah.
And someone else comes on stage.
But your 7-year-old. We're about to have next month a 7-year-old birthday for my youngest son, and I can't.
Nice.
Can't imagine. So you then have 10 years of probably trying to fake it. Don't want to get out of bed. Your son needs you.
Yeah.
Your business needs you, and you just gotta buck it out.
The friends in business-wise, I could not have asked for more understanding people. They stood by our side, and we could not have done this by ourselves. It was too difficult to do. And I think it may have been a year ago or 2 years ago, because Annie's been passed away now almost 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
Before COVID, all of that, parents could bring their kids down to the ramp on an airplane almost to where you get off, and the kid can go run and meet people. And Annie used to always run down the aisle, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy," and jumping up on me, and I, take her out to the car with Mom and Marshall. And so Annie's been dead now, and everything's fine. It's like 25 years ago. And all of a sudden, I'm getting off the plane, and all I can hear is somebody's daughter. I don't know who it is, but it was somebody's daughter saying, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy." And I stood there, and I just lost it. And finally, I had to tell them why. I said, I thought it was my daughter. No, it's, you go crazy trying to make it work and to make it seem sensible.
Well, and I guess another pattern that I've seen is the parents can't. There's divorce after a day all the time. How did you guys keep it together?
Marshall is one, but I think our faith became our reality.
Yeah.
That we didn't have to bear that burden by ourselves. That God would be there with us. And if it had not been for that, I'm not sure how we would have done it. Because I still think I've seen so many of my friends, when that happened, their light goes up in smoke and they would go different ways. But for the three of us, we hung on to each other for dear life. And Marshall just called me just about a couple hours ago to ask me that I go into lunch. He said, "Dad, what did you buy?" I told him. And he told his mother, he said, "Don't let Dad put another hot dog in his mouth again, ever."
They're taking care of you now, yeah?
Yeah, he's a good son.
Yeah, that's funny. Okay, so in what year did she die? Is it 90?
It was in the 90s.
So if she's 88, it would have been
95
or 6.
I think it was 95.
Yeah. So it was the year, probably the movie was getting produced.
Yeah, because
filmed or.
Yeah, it was premiering in different places. When Annie, because I remember there's somewhere Barbara and I had to go. I'm thinking, was it 80? Was it 95? It could have been, because Annie would have been, she was born in 88.
Mm-hmm.
In 95, she would have been like around 6 or 7.
Yeah.
That's right, because in making the movie, it was in North Carolina. That's where the studios were. And Annie was with us when the movie was being made.
Wow.
She and Marshall. And we went up there a couple of times to when it was being filmed.
Okay, so you have this really pivotal 2-year period in your life. Mm-hmm. I mean, you'd already been nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. You'd already had national best-selling book, but now it's coming into a movie, and Annie dies maybe kind of right in that same season.
Yeah, because I know it's that because I remember Tim Reed, who was the producer, sending the biggest bunch of roses I'd ever seen the day of Annie's service.
Okay.
And that was there were so many people there, all of our family, all of our friends. Tulsa was so kind to us. I could not have asked for me, Barbara, and Marshall to have been treated any better at any other place. They were all there.
Yeah. I can't imagine. I think I was there, actually. Nina would have been 3 years younger than me. And I remember that. I didn't have many people die in my circle, and she was probably one of my first deaths that I had to deal with. I just can't imagine as a parent going through that and your marriage surviving and
that's one of the side benefits of faith. It's not about tomorrow. It's about today. Yeah. And faith is so critical at the critical junctures of our life. When faith is there, it can get you through it.
Mm-hmm. Were you, I mean, you talk about stages of grief. I mean, when you're in denial and you get angry and you're trying to bargain, like with reality.
I don't know many profanity words, but I gave God every one I knew.
I bet I would have been so angry.
I couldn't understand it. I said, I said, she hadn't done anything to hurt anybody. She hadn't even lived long enough to hurt anybody. All she did was love everybody. I wrote an article that went viral called The Girl Who Waved. Annie and I live in a house that's at the bend of the road where people do their walking and jogging. And Annie, we sit on the front porch having tea. And Annie would always go, "Wave, Daddy, wave at the people." And she was too young for me to tell her that she was all the time, people don't wave back, Annie. I didn't want to tell her that. I didn't want her, she was too young to know that the color of her skin could eliminate some of her joy. I didn't want to tell her that. I said, so we just sit on the porch and wave. And after Annie passed away, these people would not have known this. One day, an older white gentleman just jogged up to the front porch where I was seated. He didn't know me and I didn't know him. And he said, "But where is the girl? She always waved at us." And then I had to tell him that Annie's not waving anymore. But I still, Barbara and Marge asked me the same thing. "Daddy, you don't have to wave at people you don't know." Then I said, "I'm not waving for them. I'm waving with Annie." Because Annie told me, wave at the people.
Yep.
And I still do.
That's great. Kids are often the greatest door opener and connector of people in a community, it seems like. They're not afraid of anything, or they don't have the baggage, if you will. When did you write Who Owns the Ice House?
I think it came out in 2010.
Okay.
I want to say 2010.
So your progression of books then is Once Upon a Time When We Were Colored, then you've got The Last Train North. And tell me about The Last Train North. I mean, it got nominated for a Pulitzer Prize.
And I was the first African American to win the Mississippi Institute of Arts and Letters Award for Last Train North.
Okay.
And it was also named the Doubleday Book of the Year.
And you're writing this in about 19...
It would have been after, it was almost simultaneously I was writing both Once Upon a Time and that one.
Okay.
But it was a couple of years.
Published a couple years later. And, you know, literally you were on the last train from like Vicksburg to wherever.
The train from New Orleans that came up through the Mississippi Delta, I think was called the Illinois Central.
Okay.
I think that's what it was called. But I know after that was the last passenger train to service the Mississippi Delta.
Okay. And tell me what is the message? What's the content in this book?
It's about tomorrow, in search of tomorrow, wondering what tomorrow will bring. It's about the mass migration of African Americans from the South to the North, looking for what that might bring into their lives. But it's also about discovery. Most people want to discover something in their lives that they don't know about outside of their hometown, home place. And, but you're almost afraid to do it because you could be comfortable at one place and pretty hesitant to go to that second place. So The Last Train North gave me an opportunity to take my fears and my anticipation and to create a story for everybody else.
So my last name is Fears, right? So I've been real curious this season recently about, you know, mapping my internal fears and recognizing, oh, I'm acting anxious, or you know, the psychology behind literally what your brain does when you're scared. You have the fight or flight, and you don't act with logic. Your brain kind of goes back into your animal brain, and but we're also often, our choices are dictated by our fear.
Yeah.
And that seems to be a message that you are repeating in a lot of what you do, is conquering your fear.
And don't be afraid to discover the depth and the breadth of your humanity.
What do you mean by that?
Most people are afraid to be who they're not and where they have not traveled and what they have not encountered. So they build their world around just a little bit that they know, as opposed to realizing you can know so much, accomplish so much if you're not afraid. You know, and I've seen that in Marshall, you know, coming from Oklahoma to make his way in Hollywood and make his way in design as he has. I don't see how he does it, because it takes a level of discovery. I'm going to do this, and then set out to make it happen. You know, when I got home today, he called me and said, what's going on? I'm off today, but I'm not going to work it tomorrow. Because he's one of the main characters in the production of The Bachelor. And he called me every night around midnight. So I just got home, Dad. And I had to explain to him that we weren't trying to run his life. I said, but Marshall, when Anne Catherine, before she passed away, I was at St. Francis Hospital with her. I slept on the floor by her bed. I went to sleep. I woke up, and your sister was dead. I said, so I cannot be fooled that things are going to stay the same. I said, I have to know where you are.
That's cool. I mean, still to this day, you got a pretty special relationship with it seems.
And so he'll call me at midnight. Say, everything's good, Dad. Make it home. No problem. Okay, talk to you tomorrow.
Wow. Cool. So The Invitation is another book you wrote, and I think you dedicated this to Marshall.
Mm-hmm. Why don't you read that dedication?
Sure.
It was just the first or second page.
To my son, Marshall Danzy Taulbert, and to his generation of Americans and those who will follow. We baby boomers were once considered the generation of promise, the generation to remodel America as we passed through it. Much remains to be done. Those who follow us must take up the gauntlet and become the new generation of promise. The Americans who, through their daily living, will do their part to move us closer to the ideals of a shared democracy and creating lingering lessons worthy of remembrance. That's perfect.
Something that I encountered.
Yes.
And because it goes beyond my encounter, becomes every man, every woman's encounter.
Yeah.
But oftentimes we don't have to take the time to do an analysis of what we encounter and how we respond. But when Miss Camille passed away, I told my wife, I said, Barbara, I have to write this story because this was not supposed to happen, but it did.
Very unlikely couple of friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which her family had generations of plantation owners.
Yeah. They were slaveholders.
They were slaveholders. And
she was almost 100.
She was almost 100. And she really tracked you down and like said, come on, like invited you.
Yeah.
And come on out. And then you guys sparked this really special relationship.
She was an incredible lady that seemed to have understood what it meant to live in a world where your color dictates everything, good or bad, but it dictates it.
Yeah.
And having grown up in the Deep South as I did, I knew her world as well as I knew my own. And I remember when we were invited to her home for supper, I thought we were going to a bungalow, a little small brick house somewhere in South Carolina. But instead, we were going to a mansion, a antebellum mansion that busloads of people stop in to look at yesterday.
Wow.
And I remember sitting in the car and not wanting to get out because all of a sudden I could feel that I was in a world I didn't want to be in. It reminded me too much of the worlds that I had written about, the world that I had read about. And, but yet there I was, surrounded by thousands of acres of cotton. It was just, she was growing.
Wow. Wow. And she was 100 years old, and
no, she was headed toward 100.
Okay.
She may have been like 87,
okay,
something.
But still, I mean, she grew up in the Jim Crow South as well.
Oh yeah,
she the other side.
Yeah, she was the other side of my world.
And yet, something, she seems like she had a big heart, reached across the aisle.
And I think her husband did as well, because I was talking to her son. Not every month, but every couple of months we get caught up on what he always teased me. He said, "Clifton, who's going to play Mama in the movie?"
I mean, it is like a Driving Miss Daisy type of. I mean, it would make for a very good movie. I think. Just such different backgrounds, and then to come together and work together on a project to make the community better. And so pretty cool. What years were you heading out to South Carolina?
I don't remember the exact dates. I know it would have been definitely the 2000s. I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I just don't know. I never even thought about the date.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's really cool. Seems like you have let's talk about another one of your friends, Sandra Day O'Connor. It seems like you guys connected, and she invited you out a bunch.
Yeah, she was our first female Supreme Court justice. I spoke in Natchez, Mississippi. They invited Southern writers to speak at the port of Natchez, the port of Biloxi, the port of New Orleans, and the port of, there's one other port. And I was chosen for the port of Natchez. And so there are people there from all over the world, about 120 people there. There were members of the, what's the name of this? There's a society out of San Francisco that is very well known, and but it's so closed. It's a very closed society. As I travel on my talk, because I haven't had to think of this place in 10 years, but it's there. And these people that come to Natchez to hear, for a lot of, in the tour of the antebellum South, but also to hear a writer. And I was the writer chosen for that place. And long story short, while I'm there reading and doing my part, everyone in the audience just treated me so nicely, is standing ovation. But I didn't know anyone in the audience at all. So Sandra Day O'Connor comes up to me, but she doesn't introduce herself. I don't know who she is, but she holds a conversation, and she's crying. And she said, "This is just amazing what you said. So amazing."
Wow. You give a speech that brings Sandra Day O'Connor to tears. And what?
Well, you don't have to emphasize that, though.
I mean, that's pretty impressive, though. I mean, she had moved her enough. A lawyer, a judge, of all things, who are known to be emotional in general, but wow. And so she then
said, I would invite you to Washington.
Okay.
And I couldn't wonder why she would invite me. Who was she? I didn't know. And the guy behind me, his words were this: "Young man, do you realize who you just shook hands with?" I said, "No, sir, I have the slightest idea. I only know one person here, and he's a woman. Not one. He's the man. I know none. I know nobody here.
Yeah.
I'm just here to talk." And he said, that was Sandra Day O'Connor. I said, you're kidding me. Because I had never seen her. I never really noticed her picture or anything.
Wow.
But she did invite me to Washington, D.C., and I spoke at the Library of Congress and to 150 of their guests.
Wow. Wow. That's really, really cool. You remember what kind of, within the timeline when that was?
No, if you had asked me yesterday, I could have looked it up. I don't know.
Okay.
I just go through my life and, that's gone.
It happened.
Face today and look forward to tomorrow.
It seems like you don't dwell on the past too much.
Not really.
I mean,
I'm very thankful for the past that crosses my path. But at the same time, I'm a firm believer in seizing the moment that we have.
mm-hmm.
Because we will never have that moment again, ever.
Yeah. I heard someone say recently, the present moment is a present. So, treat it like it. So talk to me more about that moment, being present. How do you do that?
Change is inevitable, but it doesn't always happen. But there are times in our lives when conversation run through our head that challenges us beyond where we currently are. And that challenge, I don't know what all those challenges could be. It could be write a book if you've never written one before. And you only got one little statement in your mind. That's the moment. That statement becomes the moment to be enlarged and to be carried forward. Oftentimes, those things that come for the moment, they don't come with an introductory team. They just kind of zoom through our heads and we stop and think about it, but we move on. And that's the one thing I've tried to do. And I call my son almost every day and tell him the same thing. Give the day your best observance because you're never really sure what's going to happen. And you've got to be prepared for it. Because if you're not expecting something to happen, I can pretty much assure you nothing is going to. I say you are part of that process. And that's what I try to help people understand along with myself. When we have that moment in time, we need to grab it with everything we have to make it work.
That's good. So, as an entrepreneur and a CEO, you're not just launching that willy-nilly. You've had a dream, you've had the moment, and you're kind of moving moment by moment with a commitment to what you've experienced already as well, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm sure with Marshall, entrepreneurship is a scary thing. Talk about fears. When's my next paycheck going to come in? And
no, he used to live through that. And but one of the things that has really amazed me, because I didn't teach him this, he saw what we did. And he just told me today do we have a chance to do something as a family or something else. And I asked him, do you have any money? No, do you have? He separates his tithe money from his money. And he pays his tithes immediately.
mm-hmm.
He said, Dad, I got another check coming next month. We can do it then. But he is so generous of heart. And I'm so thankful for that.
That's really cool. And literally his first fruits, he's doing that automatically, and that's great. So generosity is another thing, it seems like, that you've instilled in him and others. Being present in the moment, being generous. You and I were talking about being unselfish.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
Every book that I've written will lead you toward what happened when the unselfish life becomes your guide. What will you discover along the way? Why is unselfishness so important for you to make that discovery of who you are and what you can accomplish. Unselfishness does not wall you away from others, but it creates more paths if necessary. It certainly does not wall you away.
Mm-hmm.
And if you allow yourself to be open, you also allow yourself time and place to discover as well. And this is what unselfishness does. It helps us to discover beyond where we are. Because the easiest thing in the world to do is to stay where you are.
Mm-hmm.
And the most difficult thing is to become. Because that's a metamorphosis of circumstances and place. And most people are afraid of what a metamorphosis can look like. So rather than having to deal with it, they stay where they are with what they're doing as opposed to reaching out for anything else.
Wow. So would it be fair to say maybe, one of the most selfish things, like you said, one of the most selfish things is just to stay frozen in fear and not do anything. No, don't leave. They're just.
Because unselfishness, it creates its own highways, its own paths.
Yeah.
And it leads us to places we've never been before, people we've not even imagined. It's a great tool for discovery. How do we maximize our place on the planet?
Wow. So it's selfish to be afraid.
Thank you for joining us on this journey towards the long horizon. If you haven't yet, make sure to check us out on YouTube or follow us on your favorite social media and podcast platforms. We here at the Long Horizon Show are focused on building community. If you know someone who is seeking wisdom or could benefit from a community like ours, make sure to share this episode.